You're listening to Legally Blissed Conversations. This podcast reclaims and rewrites the stories female attorneys have been told about how we should practice law, grow our businesses, treat our clients, treat ourselves, and craft our identities as female attorneys. We'll hear inspiring stories from current and former female attorneys, the ones who question the stories they've been told, the ones who aren't afraid to live boldly and step into their own power. We'll learn from women who define success on their terms. Through lighthearted and curious conversation, we'll unpack the challenges these inspiring female attorneys have already navigated. So join me on this journey. You'll be empowered and ready to rewrite a completely new story about what is possible for you. I'd like to welcome everyone to Legally Blissed Conversations, and I would love to have a very special welcome to Diana Schimmel. Diana is a family law attorney and partner at the female-founded law firm Martine, Katz Scanlon Schimmel. She exclusively practices family law with her partners and serves clients in the greater Philadelphia, South, and Central New Jersey areas. Diana helps her divorced clients navigate that process. And the other side of her practice is family building through adoption and surrogacy work. She's married to her other half, Rocco, who's an amazing cook and unfortunate New York sports fan, and lives with him and their 3-year-old daughter, Vivian, in New Jersey. Welcome again, Diana. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, so let's talk about all the good things. So why did you go to law school?
That's a great question. So I think I probably had some family influence, as a lot of people do. No other real lawyers in my family, but my mom was a social worker. My grandmother on my dad's side was a police officer. So there was always this undertone of people and service. And I was a pretty big advocate as well. And probably by, my parents' standards, they would say I was very bossy when I was little.
No, but you're a leader now, right?
Exactly. The anecdote that my mom always tells is I was in Girl Scouts, and about like 2nd or 3rd grade, they had a career day, and I could dress up however I wanted to, grow up and be in that profession. And I chose to be a ballerina lawyer. So I wore my pink tights, my black leotard, but then one of my mom's 80s blazers with the huge shoulder pads and a fake pair of glasses with a little, clipboard with a notepad. So I combined the two.
Yeah. Okay. I think that sounds fabulous. Have you not broken that costume out again, like in the last few years?
I actually kind of made it a reality when I knew I was going to law school. In college. I double majored. So I did poli-sci and I also did dance. So I kind of did both in real life.
You did both.
I did.
So how did you balance both of those majors?
It was definitely tough. And I ultimately dropped down dance to a minor my junior year because it was just a lot, especially physically with the dance classes. But I tried my best. I had a great time in college. I went to George Mason and they made it pretty easy. So
okay, awesome. So it sounds like you had parents, and I think you said your grandfather who was a police officer. You had your grandmother was a police officer. Okay, that's awesome. I mean, it's awesome either way, but it's really cool to see a female in that role, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and especially older. How have those people inspired you today? Like, I always ask people kind of who their biggest inspirations are, and I'm curious, like, how those people being in careers of service impact you.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Obviously, my parents and my grandparents had a huge impact on me. We were a very close-knit family. We're a small family. But I think my grandparents really instilled in my parents certain values and a sense of accomplishment that they needed or wanted to see from them. And then that got passed down. But with my grandmother specifically, she was a child of the Depression era. And at that time, there weren't a lot of jobs. So she sat for the civil service exam when she was 21. And that's how she ended up in the police department. But because she had this voracious appetite for learning and for advancement, she continued on up through the ranks. But as you mentioned, this was a long time ago. So this was the 60s, 70s, 80s, and there wasn't a lot of advancement for women. There was a lot of, keeping us down. So she ultimately, with another friend and colleague of hers, lobbied to, or petitioned to rather, I should say, be able to sit for the promotions exams. And she rose through the ranks as a result of that when she succeeded. And she ultimately retired in 81 as the second highest ranking police officer, not just female. So she really paved the way. And I think her career path and her mentality trickled down to my dad, which then when he chose, my mom as a partner, they instilled that in my brother and I. And it really became something that collectively we all had as like our theme in, choosing our own paths.
Wow. I think like her path really seems like it kind of instilled core values in you.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to your granny.
Shout out to Granny is right. Is right. Yeah.
Is she still here?
Unfortunately, she's not. She did pass away at a very old age. She was in her late 90s. So
Wow.
She had a very, very full life. But there actually was a very large photo that my grandfather had blown up of her. It's her in her full police regalia in Jerusalem, leaning up against the Western Wall with her full outfit on, kissing the wall, and it's life size almost. And when she passed away, that was the one thing I wanted, and I now have it framed in my office. So,
oh wow, I'd love to see that. I'd love to
yeah,
take a picture of it and share it with me at some point.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Awesome. So you went to law school.
Mm-hmm.
And you loved every minute of it, right?
Oh yes, as much as one can.
Yeah, how was it?
I wouldn't say it was as bad as people think. I actually had a really great time. I took a year off between college and law school to regroup, and I knew I was going to law school, but I just wanted to get a little bit of time under my belt to calm down. And then when I went to law school, I went to Widener, and it was a very, very small program. There was only 120-ish kids in my graduating class. Okay. And I think that really helped. We formed a really close-knit group, and I had a really core group of friends there. So while it was definitely hard, the fact that I had a lot of fun with those friends to sort of balance it out, I think really helped.
Yeah. So where is that law school? I'm not familiar with.
Sure. So Widener University is actually in Chester, Pennsylvania, but They have two law school branches, one in Wilmington, Delaware, and one in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And I went to the Harrisburg campus.
Awesome. So would you recommend for people to take a year off between undergrad and law school?
I do. I think the friends of mine in school who did not had a little bit of antsiness left. They still wanted to have a little fun. They were still in the college mindset. I think that they never got to really experience the working world before they went, to law school. Because I worked at a law firm during that year. Yeah. And so I got to see a little bit of a preview of what I was getting into. So I think I had a little more world experience than some of the other people did. I think also just maturity, we're in our early 20s at that point, and I don't think we realize what we're getting into. So I would recommend it.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to be said for taking at least a year off, right? Or being kind of that non-traditional student and going back to law school later in life. I feel like we're seeing more and more of that, where people are actually choosing to do that. Whereas a lot of people kind of like me who didn't really know what they wanted to do after college. So it kind of thought, well, I'm going to try to extend this college gig out another few years and fairly quickly learned that like it was not the same.
Yeah, it is not the same. It is definitely not the same. I went from the dance classes to, con law. So it's definitely not the same.
Yeah. And the maturity aspect is huge. So you went to law school and you said that you had worked for a law firm. In law school, did you know that you wanted to go into family law, or were you kind of exploring different options?
I was exploring different options. At first, I thought I wanted to do contract work, which was very quickly something I did not want to do. And I learned right away I wanted to be a litigator. I participated in trial advocacy while I was in law school, and I really liked that. And that sort of became something right away that I gravitated towards. But I ended up working for a firm while I was in school that was a medium to large size firm, but they had a ton of different practice groups. So I decided that I was going to learn in each of those practice groups what I liked. Yeah. And I really gravitated towards the family law practice group and did a lot with them and would try to, work with them as much as I could. And so I had an inkling that that's what I wanted to do. Yeah. I unfortunately was in school at the height of our last recession in the 2008, 2010 era. And coming out of school, I just needed a job. So I wasn't able to focus on family law right away. But 5, 6 months after I graduated and was working in commercial litigation, I just realized life's too short. I don't want to do this. I can't, be this 25-year-old pushing other people's money around. I want to actually help. So I immediately switched and went into family law and never looked back.
Okay, so let's talk about that switch. You were
Yeah.
starting out doing the commercial litigation. I think it's really fascinating that you knew that you wanted to do litigation. It's so many people that, I talk to, they say they knew they wanted to do litigation, or they tried litigation and they're like, oh my gosh, like this is not for me. So it's so interesting how some people just really gravitate towards different areas. And that's what's cool about the practice of law, if there's anything that's cool about it.
It's cool.
There are a lot of different
Mhm.
practice areas and ways of practicing law that can match different personalities. So you were doing the commercial litigation, and I guess what, 5 or 6 months after, you're like, okay, I've got to really just settle in here and go into the practice area that lights me up. How did that work? How did you make that
Yeah.
happen?
I think I kind of took an untraditional path because I was in Harrisburg, like I said, for school. I knew I wanted to get back to Philadelphia. That's where I'm originally from. So for me, I just needed a jumping off point. So when I was applying for jobs, and the landscape of the law firm was really changing in that time because of, the economics of our time then. So I just jumped on anything. And that got me back into the city. And I figured once I was in Philadelphia, I could then make moves from there, as opposed to working in Harrisburg and being a little bit more disconnected. So when I was working at this commercial litigation firm, it was very much the trope of the law firm, the old gray-haired men, the mahogany bookshelves with the law books on them. And, they really were not kind. They were not, they did not treat their employees, especially female employees, well. And I started to sense a lot of sexual harassment. And it was very much an old boys club. So the wheels in my head started turning quickly that I wanted to get out. And I really just took a leap. And they actually, when they found out that I was planning to leave, they swiftly asked me to leave myself. But I took that as a great opportunity and just started pounding the pavement and networking and connecting. And ultimately, it led me to a really wonderful clerkship with a fantastic judge. And then from there, my next steps, but it's always been in family law since that time.
I bet you learned a ton as a clerk.
Oh my gosh, a ton. It's really a bird's eye view because you get to see both sides. And my judge was so careful to show me what lawyers were doing well and what lawyers were also not doing well. And she would say, don't do this, do this. And she was really, really influential. And I thought also similar to how my grandmother was, very much pro-female empowerment, supportive of me in the legal career. Both she and several of the other judges that all had chambers next to each other, they really were great in welcoming me, into the fold. We even did a yoga class after work together for a while in the courthouse. They brought in a yoga teacher. So I got a lot of insight from them, even in off hours conversations. It was a very cool experience.
Yeah, that's an incredible opportunity. How long were you a clerk?
So I did that for 1 year, and then I was at the Philadelphia Defender Association, which is their public defender's office. They have a child advocacy unit.
Oh, cool.
And that's essentially all the kids who are involved, unfortunately, with the juvenile dependency system. In Pennsylvania, they have the right to their own attorney. So I represented children who were in that process.
How was that opportunity for you?
I think that was really where I blossomed as an attorney and as a litigator and as a mature lawyer, because a lot of my friends at that time, I mean, this is my early 20s, I'm still like 25-ish, and a lot of my friends were still getting coffee and pushing paper and excited to just be sitting at the counsel table, whereas I was running a caseload of 150 cases, litigating in court 3, 4 times a week, managing really independently a strong caseload and cutting my teeth as a true litigator. Plus it was with a really, really great group of people, also happened to be female dominated, which I guess I keep gravitating towards that, but a really good group of people who were just passionate about what we did. Everyone was supportive. It was a very cool experience to be in a job like that, where I wasn't treated like the young kid. I was, right there shoulder to shoulder with, much older people, and, given the respect that, I should have had at prior jobs. So it was a great, great experience.
Yeah. So you said that you kind of gravitated towards these female dominated areas,
Mhm.
and you did ultimately start your own practice.
Yes.
And what's really cool about your practice is it is a female founded law firm.
Yep.
Did you go from that position to starting that law firm, or were there some more?
There were some bumps in that
Yeah, yeah.
road. So
Let's
when
talk about the obstacles. That's
let's talk about it. No, I think this is super important, because
yeah,
I think, I haven't had the most smooth career, but I wouldn't trade it. I think it made me who I am, both personally and professionally today.
for
So
sure.
when I realized that I wasn't going to be able to support myself anymore at the child advocacy unit, which it's a shame that public interest attorneys just truly are not paid what they deserve. I needed to make a change. So I jumped into private practice at that point.
Okay.
And I actually ran a solo practice for 4 years by myself, just me. I, found out very quickly some good ways to make that work, in terms of, support staff and utilizing free legal, clerks from law schools and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, yeah.
But when I got to a point where I really had plateaued and I wanted to do more, I thought about bringing on a partner. And I did. I actually had a very good friend and colleague of mine who took a while to gather her book and to feel like she could join me as an equal. And she joined me for about 8 months, just the two of us. And then she and I actually partnered with a third person. And this is where I think the difference comes in. It was a man. And the three of us were together for about 2.5 years. And that did not end well. That was a very difficult business divorce, I think,
Yeah,
if you can call it that. And
sure.
it really taught me a lot about what I wanted from my firm, how I wanted to practice, how I wanted to manage and treat clients, how I wanted to balance work life. But when I left that practice, and it was pretty abrupt that I left, I found my current partners, and they were it was like seamless. They were perfect. We completely melded and meshed as if we had been together for years. And now we've been together for 3 years, the three of us, and it feels like forever. This is truly the only time that I have ever felt really supported in my practice, and like the three of us are equals, and that we are on the same mission and mindset, both for how we want to run our business, but also our personal lives. And it's been nice. It's been refreshing.
That's key. So I have a couple of questions about this.
Of course.
If you go back to when you were solo and then you partnered up with someone, I guess it was for a couple of years, right? It was
Yeah.
the female and then the man. Where did things start going wrong? Like, what did you see there that was kind of a red flag where you're like, okay, I think that this might not work out? And the reason I'm asking this is because I think it might help people kind of see red flags earlier on in partnerships like this.
Yeah, I think that there were red flags from the start when we joined with the third partner. I
Okay.
think there's always the risk of triangulation when you have 3 versus 2, or 4. And I think that one of the big issues was ego. I'm a very strong-minded female, as was my other partner, but I think that the male attorney that we worked with had some trouble with that. We were also younger than him, so I think there was this sense of jealousy and ego. But from a legal perspective, I think we just had differing views of how we wanted to service clients.
Mhm.
So family law is so delicate. It's an
Mm,
emotional
yeah.
type of law. It's not the same as corporate litigation or business or real estate or any of that. So clients come to us in a little bit of a different posture. And I started to notice that my other partner wanted to treat it more like a business and let people be more numbers rather than people. And that wasn't how I cultivated my practice. I was getting clients not from, pumping money into advertising, but from word of mouth and from referrals and from relationships. And he was starting to squash those relationships. And I didn't love that. And I didn't love how we were prioritizing what we were prioritizing in the actual firm and the day-to-day practice.
Okay, that's fascinating. So the women that you work with now, it sounds like you all really vibe. You all
Mhm.
been together for, did you say 3 years now?
3 years. Yeah.
So how did you meet these women? Were they people that you had gone to law school with, or just kind of in the community? I'm really curious how those relationships formed.
It's a great question. I actually had a case with my one partner, Sarah Martine. She and I had a very difficult case together when I was with my prior partnership. And you sometimes when you just have an opposing counsel, you vibe. You have a similar style of practice.
Mhm.
You have a similar personality. You just connect. You somewhat drop the disarming, advocacy front, and you just become people about it. And she and I had built a relationship from that. And then when I was quickly trying to put my ducks in a row after leaving my last partnership, she was one of the first names that I thought of, because I thought, if this is how she was to work with as an opposing counsel, how would it be if I was on the same side?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I reached out to her and I called her and I just said, hey Sarah, it's Diana. I'm leaving my partnership. Would you guys be interested in having a conversation with me? And there was a beat of silence. And then she just said, yes, 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 yes. And we immediately put the wheels in motion. And, 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a desk down the hall from her.
Okay, I love it. Like, that's an example of like making it happen, right? And it seems like it wasn't a type of relationship where it was forced, right?
No,
It was kind of meant to be.
it was very organic. Yeah, very.
Okay, so and then now you have another attorney in your firm. How did she come on board?
So I think our expansion has really been organic. And that's actually one of the reasons why I love the partnership I'm in here. And my prior partnership, my old partner wanted to just grow for the sake of growing, not necessarily for finding the right fit personality wise for an attorney. So the three partners and I, right around the time that I joined, they also brought on an of counsel. So someone who works, on her own schedule somewhat independently, but she is there as well. Then we really needed a true associate, someone who could support us on our cases, but also handle her own. And we started with her about a year ago. She actually clerked with us. The Drexel Law School has a really great co-op program that we take advantage of, where we can get free legal help while they get credit for semesters. And this particular woman was just someone who blew us away, and we made her an offer and she stayed with us after her clerkship. So it was great.
That's awesome. So are you all in the same office right now, or are you all kind of scattered? How does that work at your firm?
That's a good question. COVID and the pandemic
Yeah.
sort of changed up our working model.
Quickly,
Um,
probably.
yes. So originally we just had the office in Cherry Hill. That was when my partners were together without me. And then when I came on board, I have more cases in different places, and we expanded our reach. So that's when we opened two new offices, one in Princeton, New Jersey, which is the central part of the state. So that added on to the Cherry Hill practice in South Jersey. And then we also opened a Philadelphia office right in Center City, so that I could service clients in all those areas. And then now the idea is to continue to grow, not in office space. Those are the three offices. We're not looking to grow any additional locations, but to get some additional attorneys on board. Most of us are in the Cherry Hill office. I work out of the other two offices, but we all take advantage of working remotely. We all have kids. We all have, dogs, lives, husbands, partners that we want to also be able to manage. And we got a nice taste of that while we were, working from home during the pandemic. So we kind of are non-traditional in that sense.
Let's take a quick pause for a message from my sponsor, Prominent Practice.
Are you thinking about a career transition from big law or partnership to a solo practice, selling your practice, or maybe you're launching a project unrelated to law? Whatever the reason for your transition, you'll need support along the way. Enter Prominent Practice, an executive consulting and marketing firm specializing in branding, positioning, and reputation management for transitioning attorneys. Founded by a female entrepreneur who spent a decade building smart digital platforms for thought leaders before pivoting to focus on high-end service providers who were preparing for successions, mergers, and acquisition events in their businesses. If you're thinking about making a big business move, don't risk losing the ability to leverage the reputation you've spent your career building. Let Prominent Practice be your guide. Visit prominentpractice.com/blissed for an exclusive introduction.
So I think that's really cool that you're kind of encouraging this culture of work life, like a true work life balance, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So what does that look like for you and kind of the future of your firm as you bring on new people? Like how do you integrate that and I guess like train new people to understand what is important to you and how you all practice?
We actually had this question and conversation rather with our associate recently because we noticed she was starting to struggle with certain things, including time management. So first and foremost, we lead by example. I think we like to show our staff that we can manage a caseload, but if we need to leave for a doctor's appointment, we do. If maybe one day we need to leave at 12, the next day we burn the midnight oil. So it's all about a balance that way. But what we talked to our associate about and how we're trying to train her is that she should be honing her own skills and her own development, but that she shouldn't be beholden to like the 9 to 5. So if one day she needs to come in at 10, okay, she just needs to know that her work product has to be done. So we're more of a deadline work product based metric system as opposed to like how many hours were you in the office? Because we've really found that it doesn't mean you're more productive if you're sitting there for more hours.
It really doesn't.
Yeah. Mhm.
So I know one thing that is really important to you is client service, like providing an amazing client experience.
Yeah.
And perhaps that was part of the thing that went wrong with the prior firm that you had. There was an imbalance there with the other partner.
Mhm.
What does really good client service look like to you?
I think it's communication. They always teach us, in law school about the horror stories of those clients that, sue for malpractice because they never heard from their attorney. But I hear so many stories of just not getting a return phone call, not getting a return email, missing deadlines, not explaining things, just shooting off emails with scheduling notices, but not explaining what that means and the next steps, or diffusing some of the nerves of what a boilerplate pleading might look like, or what somebody's questions are. So for me, it's communication. I like to make sure that my client hears from me and doesn't just hear from me in a clinical way. So if I'm sending them a copy of something to review, I'm talking to them about it. I'm sending them an email, inviting them to then call me on the phone about it. I'm getting back to them within a reasonable period of time. If I say that we're going to do something by a certain date, we do that. We follow that model. I think a lot of attorneys just take the money and run and don't really follow through with communication. So people are left in the dark. And that's something that really bothers me when I hear that.
Yeah, that has to be particularly scary in the divorce setting or as a family law attorney in general.
Yeah,
To be
absolutely.
like not knowing what's going on with your case. So I'm curious, where do you envision your law firm going?
I love that question. It's fun to imagine.
Yeah.
We actually would like to grow in terms of number of attorneys. So I envision, us bringing on more attorneys to help with our practice so that we call ourselves boutique for a reason. We are not one of those firms that like jams in cases so that nobody gets the right amount of attention. We specifically curate our caseload. So I would love to be able to continue to do that while still, supporting ourselves in our business model. So bringing on more attorneys, bringing on the right attorneys who, jive with our mission and our mantras, and then continuing to work myself. But like I said, being able to be selective about who I work with and how much I take on, and being able to continue to enjoy that work-life balance I've cultivated now.
So you mentioned curating your caseload. What does that look like to you?
I think one of the other things I didn't love at my prior partnership was there was no ability to use discretion. So any clients that came in, as long as they could pay, we were taking them. And I really didn't like that. That was not my style when I was a solo, and it was not how I wanted to practice. I think you can get that one bad apple client that then sucks up all your time and your emotion and your money from the other clients. So I really like to be able to cultivate clients who I truly feel comfortable helping, who I know I can help. Sometimes a client just doesn't communicate with you, you don't click, and that's okay. So when like a client comes to me for a consultation and they are almost sheepishly telling me they've met with other attorneys, I say, good, you should find somebody who fits with you. So I don't want to work with somebody who doesn't want to work with me, number one, or who's fighting the process, or who's misplaced some anger at me, or who I know has a goal that I just can't advocate for appropriately. And I've gotten a lot better, at that as I've moved into, my 12th year now of practice, at figuring it out earlier on and making the call to say, look, I think you might be better served with somebody else. And that's okay.
Yeah, I think like for me, the front end client vetting really has helped with some of my sanity.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
It sounds, yeah. And like people think, oh gosh, I have to take on the client, even though they're willing to pay, or maybe it is something that you can legitimately help them with. But if it's not a fit, like if you have any kind of gut feeling, I feel like with a prospective client, and you really have to kind of hone in that intuition and not take the client. And it's okay, like, because there will always be clients coming through. So,
and I think a lot of young attorneys make that mistake because they're so nervous that they're not going to have enough casework to keep the lights on. But and I was certainly that attorney as well when I was a solo. But you just hit the nail on the head. There are always going to be more cases. And if you cannot take the one that may be extremely difficult and suck up all your time, that opens you up maybe for 3 or 4 really great cases that can end up making you more money and giving you more satisfaction and serving the clients better in those situations. So it ultimately ends up working out.
It does. And those 3 or 4 clients that you give amazing service to, they're going to refer you other amazing clients. So it all really is just a kind of like a positive flywheel. So I want to ask you, I had asked, what do you want our listeners to know about you? Do you mind if I read this? This is, yeah. You said, I want female attorneys to know that over the last 12 years of practicing law, it has not always been easy. I came out of law school at the height of the recession, and the legal world was drastically changing. Jobs were scarce. And what big law looked like was evolving. That said, it was still a very male-dominated boys club. Took the first job that came out. I want them to know that I'm a fighter, staunch feminist, that I don't believe in paying the female or mommy tax, and I want total equality for myself and other females in our fields. Okay, I absolutely love that, but I'm curious, when you say you don't believe in paying the female or mommy tax, I'm curious, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So the female or the mommy tax is obviously the pay inequality. So I work for myself. I don't necessarily face that, but I will tell you that there are a lot of young female attorneys who go out and don't know what compensation to ask for, or the correct compensation to ask for, or even attorneys in my posture don't know how to set their correct hourly rates, don't know how to ask for money. That was something that they didn't teach us in law school. You have to be able to value your time and your expertise and stand by it. People are going to try and get anything they can for free. So you need to value your consultation time, your work product, the expertise and advice that you're giving to people. So I think that's number one. And sometimes females have been conditioned to, sort of bring themselves back down and, settle for less than. And I don't think that that's something we should abide by. And then the mommy tax is more, we want to be able to have families, but we also don't have access to support for maternity leave or parental leave or childcare, or if you need to step aside and breastfeed while you're taking a deposition. Like there's not a whole lot of support for that. So I very much strongly believe that we should support other women to encourage them to not only build their families as they want, but also support them when they come back, so that they can continue to advance in their careers and don't feel like they have to take a step backwards just because they had, a child and were out on maternity leave. And that's, a big issue that I think we're facing now in general, especially with our current, climate and the Supreme Court decisions that have come out, that I really, really, really want women to assert themselves in that way and not leave before they need to, not feel like they can't take enough time with their children, not be afraid to come back to a job and ask for some accommodation. I mean, I'm the breadwinner in my household. My husband's an engineer and he does very well, but I'm the breadwinner. So when I think about maternity leave, I mean, that's scary for our household. So I want other women to think about that as well and to ask for what they deserve.
Yes. And it's so funny. You just took the words right out of my mouth. I was getting ready to say, ask for what you want.
Mhm.
I'm wondering, like, if you could write a letter and give yourself a piece of advice the day that you graduated from law school, what would you tell little Diana, like, right when she's like so optimistic and happy and she's got her lovely, robe and cap on? What would you tell her, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I would tell her to trust her gut more. I think that there were some hurdles that could have been avoided had I just trusted my gut and had confidence in myself and my intuition. I think that's number one. I would also tell her that it's not going to be an easy road, but not to give up because of that, but to keep fighting. I think a lot of my generation, and I guess I'm technically a geriatric millennial, but I refuse to accept that. I refuse to accept that. But I think a lot of us had this idea growing up that like it was just going to be you keep putting one foot in front of the other, keep doing the right things, keep meeting the metrics, and then everything will just be easy for you. And that's not how it goes. So I would tell her that it may be difficult, but not to give up, to keep going.
Okay, I love that. So where can people find you, Diana?
Sure. So our website is familylawmks.com. You can find us there. We also have a Instagram. We post pretty funny memes. We just get a kick out of some nerdy legal jokes, but some information there as well. That's at MKSS Family Law. That's on Instagram. They can find me at @Schimmel on Instagram as well. I share a lot of content, family law related and otherwise, on my personal page. And, they can search any of those places, of course, phone and email, but I find that most people search their lawyers by social media now. So that's probably the best place.
Diana, thank you so much for just hanging out with me and sharing your story and your nuggets of wisdom. It's been amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us today on Legally Blissed Conversations. If you love this episode and you want to hang out with other inspiring and light gold female attorneys, be sure to join the Legally Blissed community at legallyblissed.com. And be sure to follow me on Instagram at Susie Hickson. See you next time.